The planet Arkan was once a world of beauty. It had 2 golden suns that warmed its wide green lands and silver rivers that ran between mountains. The alien race called the Terralians lived there in great cities made of shining stone and glass. They were proud, clever, and creative. For many ages they had mastered science and built machines that could reach the stars, but time had not been kind to them. The Terralians' hunger for power and resources had slowly destroyed their own home. For centuries they dug deep into the earth, taking minerals and energy to fuel their cities. Forests were cut down, lakes dried up, and the sky turned gray. Their technology became more advanced, but their planet grew weaker every year. Now Arkan was a shadow of what it once had been. The land was covered in dust and dry winds. The air tasted of metal and sand. The once proud rivers had become empty trenches. Even the sun seemed to burn harsher, giving light that scorched instead of warmed. The Terralians were dying. Only a few thousand of them were left, living inside broken shelters made from the ruins of their old towers. They moved slowly, their skin pale and cracked from the dry air. Each family kept small containers of water, protecting them more carefully than gold. Water was life, and there was almost none left. Every sunrise, groups of Terralians would gather at the center of their ruined city of Varentel, waiting for the water rations to be given. The High Keeper, an old alien named Varn, would stand upon a broken platform and call out names. His voice was weak, but every word mattered. 2 measures for Clan Orte, 1 measure for Clan Reth, he said, his trembling hands pouring the precious liquid into cups. The aliens would hold their breath as each drop fell, terrified to spill even one. Children no longer played. Gardens no longer grew. Hope itself was fading like the last puddle under the suns. The Terralians whispered among themselves that the end was near. Some spoke of leaving the planet, but no ships remained. Their once great space fleet had been lost during a storm of radiation decades ago. They were trapped, bound to the world they had broken. It was on one of these hopeless days that the sky changed. A sharp, glowing streak cut through the upper atmosphere, something bright and alive. Unlike anything the Terralians had seen in generations, it blazed across the orange sky and fell beyond the horizon with a distant rumble. Many thought it was another meteor, but others ran to the edge of the city to see. From the clouds of dust, a metallic shape appeared, a starship. The craft was small, sleek, and clearly not Terralian. It had a white hull with blue marks and a symbol the aliens had never seen before. A flag with a circle of stars and lines across it. Smoke rose from its side where it had crash-landed into the dry plain. The Terralians gathered around the wreck, their large black eyes wide with wonder and fear. Some carried tools. Others carried old energy weapons that barely worked. They had no idea what kind of creature was inside. Then the ship's side door hissed open. A figure stepped out, tall in a suit of silver and gray with a helmet that reflected the twin suns. The creature removed the helmet, revealing a face none of them had ever seen before. The stranger's skin was light. His eyes were blue like the sky they had lost long ago. His hair was brown and dusty from the crash. He looked around with confusion, and then said something in a language the Terralians did not understand. This was Ethan Cole, a human engineer and explorer from a small trade vessel called Pathfinder. His ship had suffered a navigation failure during a storm near the outer colonies. The system malfunctioned and threw him off course, forcing him to make an emergency landing on the nearest planet, Arkan. He had expected to find an empty rock. Instead, he had found life. Ethan raised his hands to show peace. "I come in peace," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." The aliens murmured to each other, their translator devices slowly picking up his words. Finally, the High Keeper Varn stepped forward, his old legs trembling. "You are not Terralian," he said slowly. Ethan smiled carefully. "No, I'm human. From Earth." The word Earth meant nothing to them, but one thing did: the small canister of water hanging from his belt. Their eyes followed it like hungry wolves watching food. Varn pointed weakly. "Water?" Ethan looked down, confused. "Oh, this? Yeah, just water." He opened the cap and took a sip. The aliens gasped. Some of them even stepped back as if watching a miracle. One alien woman whispered, "He drinks freely." Ethan noticed their reaction and frowned. "Wait, you don't have water here, do you?" Varn lowered his head. Not enough to live. Our planet is dying. Ethan's heart sank. He looked around at the cracked ground, the broken machines, the lifeless sky. He had seen many worlds during his travels, but never one so empty, so hopeless. How long? He asked quietly. Too long, Varn said. We used everything. The rivers are gone. The rain no longer falls. Our machines are dead. We wait for the end. Ethan stood silently for a moment, feeling the hot wind on his face. Then his old training as an engineer kicked in. He walked a few steps away, knelt down, and scooped a handful of dirt. It was dry, yes, but not entirely lifeless. Beneath the top layer, he saw a faint color, darker dust, slightly damp. Maybe not the end yet, he said to himself. The aliens looked at him in confusion. Ethan stood up and smiled slightly. You might still have water down there, underground, deep. He pointed to the earth beneath their feet. You just need to reach it. Varn shook his head. We tried. Our drills broke. The stone is too strong. Ethan tapped his chin thoughtfully. Then maybe you just need the right tools. He walked back to his ship and opened one of the storage compartments. Inside were crates filled with repair parts, metal scraps, and a small portable power reactor. He turned back to the aliens who were watching him closely. My ship's damaged, but my equipment's still working. Maybe I can help. The Terralians didn't know what to think. This strange creature from another world wanted to dig into the ground for them. Some thought he was crazy. Others were desperate enough to believe. That night, Ethan stayed in his ship, setting up lights and unpacking his gear. The aliens gathered at a distance, whispering stories. Some called him a sky ghost. Others said he was a messenger from the stars, sent to test them. But when morning came, Ethan began his work. He spent the first hours checking the soil, scanning the rock layers, and measuring energy signals. The Terralians watched from afar as he moved with calm focus, drawing plans in the dust and building strange machines from old metal. The Highkeeper approached him again. Why do you help us, human? Ethan looked up, sweat on his forehead, and smiled. Because I can. And because no one should die just because they don't have water. Varn blinked, trying to understand that kind of kindness. His people had long forgotten such simple generosity. The suns burned high above, the wind howled across the plain, and the human kept working. He built a small frame from scrap metal, then attached it to a drill core powered by his reactor. The sound of the drill echoed through the dry valley, a sound of hope that the aliens hadn't heard in a lifetime. As the ground shook beneath their feet, some Terralians fell to their knees, praying silently. Children who had never seen water beyond a cup's worth stared in wide-eyed wonder. Ethan smiled again, watching the dust rise. Let's see if there's still life in you, old planet. The machine hummed louder, digging deeper. Steam hissed. The smell of wet minerals filled the air. For the first time in centuries, the Terralians felt a breeze that carried the faint scent of moisture. It was only a small step, but to them it felt like a miracle. Far above, the suns glowed golden as if watching. Deep beneath the surface, something ancient stirred, a promise that Arkan might yet live again. And as Ethan Cole wiped the sweat from his brow, he whispered softly, "This world just needs a little help and a lot of hard work." The aliens didn't yet know it, but their fate had already changed, because a human had arrived. The next morning, the first light of the twin suns stretched across the dry plains of Arkan. The dusty wind brushed over the old ruins and the quiet city of Varantel. The Terralians woke slowly, tired from another night without enough water. Yet something different stirred in the air, the steady hum of human machinery. Ethan Cole had not stopped working since dawn. His crash ship now looked more like a workshop than a wreck. Metal scraps were arranged neatly, wires ran between power cells, and small tools were laid in perfect order. The man worked with purpose, moving from one machine to another, his eyes focused and his hands steady. He was building something new, using broken Terralian tools, parts from his ship and pieces of ruined machines he had scavenged. Ethan had created a makeshift drilling system. It wasn't elegant, but it was strong. A rotating drill head of hardened alloy, powered by his portable fusion reactor, stood ready near the center of the city. Curious eyes watched him from every direction. The Terralians had gathered in silence, unsure whether to hope or laugh. No one had dared to believe that a single human could do what their entire race had failed to do. Highkeeper Varn stood at the front, leaning on his metal staff. His tired eyes followed every movement Ethan made. You truly believe you can find water in this dead ground? He asked. Ethan looked up with a half-smile. I don't believe, Keeper. I calculate. The soil readings show moisture below 300 meters. That means there's still groundwater. Varn tilted his head, confused but impressed. 300 meters? We have never dug that deep. The rocks become too hard, Ethan nodded. That's where my drill comes in. It can cut through almost anything if it has enough power. The old alien frowned. Power is something we have little of. I've got enough to start, Ethan replied, patting the side of his reactor. This baby's small, but it's strong. It'll last long enough to make a difference. He looked around at the curious crowd. But I'll need help. I can't do it alone. There was silence. The aliens exchanged nervous glances. Many of them were weak from hunger and thirst. Work under the burning suns was painful. Yet something about the humans' confidence was infectious. Finally, a young alien stepped forward. Her name was Sira, one of the few who still believed in change. Her pale skin shimmered faintly in the sunlight, and her large eyes glowed with quiet determination. I will help, she said. If there is even a small chance, we must take it. Her courage encouraged others. Slowly, more Terralians moved forward, farmers, engineers, and workers. Within minutes, a small group had gathered around Ethan. Good, he said, smiling. Then let's get to work. For the next several hours, Ethan directed them carefully. He showed them how to connect the cables, adjust the pressure valves, and balance the drill's frame. His patience surprised the aliens. He didn't shout or command like a ruler. He explained things, taught them, and encouraged them. Keep your hands steady, he told Sira as she held a wrench. If you rush, you'll make mistakes. Precision saves energy, she nodded, trying her best to follow his instructions. Even the High Keeper found himself helping, holding spare parts and translating Ethan's strange words into the Terralian tongue. For the first time in years, the city of Varentel was alive with sound, the ringing of metal, the hum of tools, and the quiet rhythm of teamwork. By midday, the drill was ready. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead and took a deep breath. All right, he said. Let's see if this planet still remembers what water feels like. He pressed the activation switch. The machine roared to life, its metal arms spinning rapidly. Dust flew into the air as the drill bit dug into the hard ground. The Terralians stepped back, shielding their faces from the wind. The sound was deafening, echoing through the ruins like thunder. At first, the drill barely moved. The ground resisted just as Varn had said. But Ethan adjusted the pressure, shifted the power flow, and the drill began to sink deeper, inch by inch. Hours passed. The suns climbed high, turning the air into a wave of heat. Many aliens grew tired and thirsty, but they refused to leave. They couldn't take their eyes off the strange human who worked tirelessly, adjusting controls, checking readings, and repairing overheating parts with quick hands. At last, when the suns began to set, a deep vibration shook the ground. The drill's tone changed, lower, wetter. Ethan's eyes widened. We're close, he shouted. Sira leaned forward, her heart racing. Close, you mean? Ethan grinned. I mean, we're about to hit water. The drill broke through the final layer of stone, and a sudden burst of steam hissed upward. The Terralians gasped. Then came a gurgling sound, and soft at first, then louder. From the hole, a jet of clear, shining water erupted into the air. The aliens screamed in joy. Some cried, others laughed, and many fell to their knees, reaching out with trembling hands as the water rained down upon them. It sparkled in the fading sunlight like liquid diamonds. Ethan stepped back, smiling proudly. Well, he said with a small chuckle, looks like business is flowing. The Terralians didn't understand his joke, but they understood his gift. Children ran forward, cupping their hands and drinking freely for the first time in their lives. Parents watched with tears in their eyes. The High Keeper stood silent for a long time, his old heart overwhelmed. He finally turned to Ethan. Human, you have done what we could not do in 1,000 years. Ethan shrugged modestly. Sometimes all it takes is looking at an old problem with new eyes. He looked at the stream of water still flowing from the hole and quickly began setting up containment pipes to store it safely. We'll need tanks, he said. Can't let this go to waste. Varn nodded. Whatever you need, we will build. That night, under the pale glow of the twin moons, the city of Varentel celebrated. It was not a grand celebration. They had little food and no music, but laughter returned to their voices. They passed small cups of water to each other, sharing every drop equally. Ethan sat beside the new well, watching them with quiet satisfaction. Sierra approached him, carrying a small piece of old metal. It was carved with a symbol, 2 curved lines forming a circle. "This is our mark for life," she said. "We place it on places that bring hope. May we place it here?" Ethan smiled. "Of course." Sierra pressed the mark into the stone near the well. "Then this place shall be called the Well of Hope," she said. The name spread quickly. Every Terralian who passed whispered it with reverence. The Well of Hope, the first source of water their world had seen in generations. As the night deepened, Ethan checked his instruments again. The readings showed strong water pressure below. This wasn't just a small pocket. It was a reservoir, large enough to feed many wells across the land. His heart filled with excitement. He realized something important. He could help them not just survive, but rebuild. He looked at the tired but joyful faces around him and said softly, "This is only the beginning." The next morning, Ethan began drawing plans for new wells. He taught the Terralians how to maintain the drill and purify the water. Using solar cells from his ship, he built small pumps to distribute the flow. He worked side by side with the aliens, never resting for long. The High Keeper often stood nearby, watching the humans' endless energy. "You work harder than a machine," Varn said once. Ethan laughed. "Machines don't care. People do." Soon, small pools of clean water began appearing across the city. The once dry gardens now had moisture again. The air felt fresher, lighter. Hope had returned to Arken, carried by the sound of running water. At sunset, Sierra came to him again. "Why do you do this?" she asked quietly. "You could have left us to die." Ethan looked up at the glowing sky. "Because where I come from, we don't walk away from those who need help. We fix what's broken, even if it's not ours." Sierra smiled softly. "Then perhaps humans are not so different from us." "Only braver," Ethan chuckled. "Not braver and just stubborn." They both laughed, and for the first time in centuries, laughter echoed through the ruins of Varantel. Above them, the stars began to shine. The Well of Hope glimmered beneath the light, a symbol of what one human and one dying world could achieve together. Deep inside the planet, water continued to flow, a quiet promise that Arken would live again. And Ethan Cole, the lost engineer from Earth, had just become the first watermaker in alien history. The Well of Hope changed everything. In only a few days, the once silent city of Varantel began to stir with life again. The air no longer felt lifeless. The sound of laughter and rushing water mixed together, filling the cracked streets. The Terralians could hardly believe what they were seeing. They had survived another week, not because of luck, but because of one human named Ethan Cole. Ethan's drill had found more than just a small spring. It had opened the door to a deep underground reservoir that stretched far beneath the old city. For the first time in hundreds of years, clean water was flowing freely. The aliens began collecting it in every container they could find: old jars, broken pipes, even damaged helmets. But Ethan knew that uncontrolled water would quickly turn into chaos. If they wasted it or fought over it, everything they had gained could be lost. So he decided to bring order to the miracle he had created. The next morning, he called the Terralians to a meeting near the well. The sky was pale blue, and the Icar air smelled fresh from the mist that rose out of the new water. Dozens of aliens gathered around him, their faces full of curiosity and hope. Ethan stood on a large piece of stone, holding a small metal tablet that displayed numbers and graphs. "All right," he said in a clear voice. "We've got good news and hard news. The good news is that there's plenty of water underground. The hard news is that we have to manage it carefully. If we waste it now, the well could dry up again." The crowd murmured softly. The idea of too much water sounded strange to them. For so long they had known only drought. Ethan smiled kindly. "Don't worry, we'll do this together. I've got a plan." He took a stick and drew lines on the dusty ground. "We'll build tanks to store water safely. We'll use filters to make sure it stays clean. And we'll make pipes to carry it across the city." Sierra, who had helped him from the start, stepped forward. "But we have little metal left," she said. "Our machines are broken." Ethan nodded. "That's why we'll recycle. We'll take apart the old machines and rebuild new ones from their parts. Nothing goes to waste." The Highkeeper Varn listened quietly, leaning on his staff. He had ruled the city for decades, but now he saw something new. A leader who did not command with fear or pride, but with reason and kindness. When Ethan finished explaining, Varn raised his hand. "We will follow your plan, human. The water you gave us is life. You shall guide us in how to protect it." Ethan smiled. "Then let's get started." For the next few weeks, Varentel became a city of work and rebuilding. The Terralians began tearing down old ruins and carrying metal pieces to Ethan's workshop. He showed them how to melt and reshape the material using solar energy. The aliens learned fast, curious about every tool he used. They built 3 large tanks made from salvaged ship hulls, each one polished to shine under the suns. Water flowed into them through clean pipes, filtered through sand and rock systems Ethan designed. The once dusty streets now had small streams running between the homes, and children splashed their feet in puddles, laughing for the first time in memory. To keep everything fair, Ethan created a system. "Everyone gets water," he said, "but we'll trade for labor or materials. You work, you earn. No one is left behind." It wasn't greed, it was balance. He wanted to teach the Terralians how to build a future, not just survive from his help. Soon, the aliens began calling his organization the Water Guild. Ethan didn't plan for it to be a business, but that's what it became. The Terralians started bringing him small minerals, old tech, and bits of energy crystals in exchange for extra water. Ethan accepted everything and used it to repair more systems. The guild grew. Sira became the main overseer, managing distribution. Young workers kept records, learning mathematics from Ethan. The Highkeeper supervised fairness, ensuring no family went thirsty. Every evening, when the suns lowered, Ethan would sit beside the Well of Hope and look at the city that was slowly coming back to life. He was proud, not because of profit, but because he saw a dying world beginning to breathe again. However, change often brings conflict. Far beyond the city, in the desert lands of Roth-Ka, there lived powerful alien warlords. They had controlled what little water remained on Arkan for years, selling it at impossible prices to desperate survivors. When they heard about a new source of free water in Varentel, they grew angry. One of them, a fierce leader named Zareth, smashed his cup against the ground. "A human? A human gives water to the people? That cannot be allowed." Another warlord, Kravor, sneered. "If the people drink freely, they will no longer need us. Our power will vanish." They decided to send spies to learn the truth. Within a few days, a small group of their scouts reached Varentel. They saw the tanks, the pipes, and the smiling faces. They saw Terralians working together instead of fighting, and in the center they saw Ethan Cole, teaching children how to build pumps, laughing as they tried to copy his movements. The spies returned with the report. "The human is teaching them to make more wells. Soon every city will have water." Zareth's eyes burned with fury. "Then we must stop him before his kindness destroys our rule." Back in Varentel, Ethan was unaware of the coming danger. He was focused on his next project, building a water purification plant. He wanted to make sure that as the wells expanded, the Terralians would always have clean, safe drinking water. Sira brought him data sheets and maps every morning. "The water flow from the second well is strong," she said one day. "We can reach the next settlement within a month if we keep building." Ethan nodded with satisfaction. "Good. We'll help them set up their own guild. If every city works together, the planet can heal faster." Varn joined them, smiling faintly. "You think far ahead, human. Most of us can only think of surviving the next day. That's the difference between surviving and living," Ethan replied. "If we only think of today, tomorrow will never come." The Highkeeper placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You are not just a guest here anymore, Ethan Cole. You are one of us." Ethan smiled warmly but said nothing. He didn't need thanks. Seeing progress was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the once dead land around Varentel began to change color. Patches of green moss appeared near the wells. Seeds buried for centuries started to grow again. Small alien birds returned to the skies drawn by the water. Everywhere Ethan went, people greeted him with smiles. Children ran after him shouting, "Watermaker, Watermaker." He would wave and laugh. "Easy now. Don't waste your energy. It's hot out here." At night, when the stars covered the dark sky, the aliens told stories about him. They said the stars had sent a man made of light who brought rivers to the dead. Ethan would overhear them and laugh quietly to himself. "I'm no savior," he'd whisper. "Just an engineer doing his job." Still, his name spread far beyond the city. Travelers carried word of the human water-bringer to the deserts, mountains, and distant ruins. And where his story reached, people began to dream again. But dreams often draw attention, and not all attention is good. One morning, a scout ran into the city, his breathing heavy. "Warlords from Roth-Ka are coming," he shouted. "They march with machines and weapons. They will destroy the wells." Fear spread through the crowd. The Terralians had known the cruelty of the warlords before. They had seen cities burned for less. Ethan remained calm. "Then we'll prepare. I didn't build these wells to be taken by bullies." He called for the Water Guild. "We'll make defenses," he said. "Not weapons, shields. We'll protect the water and the people." Using spare metal and energy crystals, he began building defense barriers powered by his reactor. They were not deadly, just strong enough to block attacks and protect the tanks. Sierra looked worried. "They will come in great numbers, Ethan. You cannot fight them all." "I'm not going to fight them," Ethan said quietly. "I'm going to teach them the same thing I taught you, that there's enough for everyone if we work together." He looked toward the horizon where a faint line of dust rose in the distance. The warlords were coming. But Ethan Cole was ready, not with weapons, but with courage, intelligence, and faith in what humanity stood for. The water business had become something greater than trade. It had become hope itself, and Ethan would defend it. The morning sun rose over Varentel, painting the dusty city in shades of orange and gold. The twin suns glared down, but there was no fear in the city this time, only preparation. Word had spread quickly. The warlords from Roth-Ka were marching toward the city, eager to take the water that had been flowing freely for the first time in centuries. Children who had laughed near the Well of Hope only yesterday now watched from behind walls, eyes wide with worry. Farmers and builders paused in their work, whispering about the approaching army. The humans and Terralians were outnumbered, and the thought of a fight filled them with anxiety. Ethan Cole walked through the streets, inspecting the defenses. His calm presence gave people courage. Though his hands were tired from building and organizing, his eyes shone with determination. He did not see the warlords as enemies to kill. He saw them as desperate rulers who had lost their way. Sierra joined him, holding a small device showing the distance of the approaching army. "They are close, Ethan, hundreds of soldiers and machines. They will arrive within hours," Ethan nodded. "Then we need to be ready, not for war but to protect life." He began instructing the Water Guild to finish the barriers. They used old metal from ruined towers, solar-powered energy shields, and reinforced panels to cover the tanks and wells. Children and adults worked side by side, carrying pieces of metal, wiring power conduits, and reinforcing the walls. "Remember," Ethan told them, "we are not fighting to hurt them. We fight to keep what belongs to everyone. Defend the water, protect your people, and nothing more." High Keeper Varn, standing nearby, nodded approvingly. "The human teaches more than survival. He teaches honor." Hours passed, and the horizon began to shimmer with heat. Dust rose into the sky, showing the movement of the warlords' forces. The rumble of machines and the clank of old metal reached the city before the army did. Zareth, the leader of Roth-Ka, rode at the front of the army. His armor glinted in the suns, and his eyes burned with fury. Beside him, Kravor, his second-in-command, shouted orders to their soldiers. "Take the city," he bellowed. "Take the water. No human or alien will stop us." The Terralians watched silently from behind the barricades, clutching their tools and makeshift weapons. Fear mixed with hope, fear of the warlord's strength, hope from the human who had given them life. Ethan climbed onto the largest tank, holding his metal tablet. "Remember what we practiced," he called to the guild. "Keep the barrier strong. Keep the water safe. Do not attack unless attacked. Protect life. That is the priority." The Terralians nodded, their eyes wide with understanding. Then the first machines arrived. Rusted, ancient tanks that had barely moved for decades, driven by desperate soldiers, rumbled toward the city gates. Some wheels collapsed under the weight of the desert sand, slowing the advance. Dust clouds rose around them as the warlord's army approached. The children behind the walls clung to their parents, eyes fixed on Ethan. They whispered to each other, "He will save us." Ethan activated the energy barriers for the first time. A blue shield formed around the tanks and wells, pulsing with light. When the first machine struck, sparks flew, but the barrier held firm. The Terralians gasped. They had never seen such strength before. Not from metal, not from nature, not from a single human. Zareth roared in frustration. "The human uses magic," he shouted. Ethan shook his head and pressed another switch. Small solar turrets on top of the barriers began spinning, releasing bright flashes of light to blind the warlord's soldiers. It was non-lethal but highly effective. Soldiers staggered back, tripping over rocks and sand, unable to aim at the people behind the shields. Sira helped coordinate the Terralians, directing them to secure additional pipelines and water tanks while keeping the soldiers distracted. "Move faster! Protect the pipes," she called. The battle of wits and strategy began. The warlords had machines, but Ethan had ingenuity. Every time a vehicle advanced, it became trapped in shallow sand pits that Ethan had secretly dug. Every time a soldier tried to climb the walls, a blinding light forced him to retreat. Zareth's anger grew with every failed attempt. "This human!" he shouted. "He uses no weapons, yet he stops us." Kravor gritted his teeth. "He is cleverer than any of us. We cannot fight him like this." As the sun climbed higher, the battle continued without bloodshed. The Terralians were inspired. They moved faster, worked harder, and coordinated like a single organism. Farmers, builders, and children all helped to strengthen the defenses. One soldier tried to break through the main gate using a makeshift battering ram. Ethan quickly activated a new mechanism, a rotating metal shield that blocked the attack and caused the ram to spin out of control. The soldier fell into the sand, bruised but unharmed. Highkeeper Varn watched in awe. "I have ruled for decades," he whispered, "and never have I seen courage and intelligence work together so well." Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. "They will stop when they have no choice," he said. "I'm not here to destroy them, just to make them see reason." By midday, the warlord's army had begun to falter. Their machines overheated, wheels sank in sand, and soldiers grew tired and thirsty. They had expected easy victory, but Ethan's barriers, tactics, and coordination had worn them down. Zareth realized his strategy had failed. He rode forward to confront the human directly. "Step aside, human," he shouted. "Give us the water or we will take it." Ethan stood on the tank, hands open. "I don't want to fight you," he said calmly. "The water is for everyone. If you work with us, you can have it too." Zareth laughed bitterly. "Work with those who are weak? Never," Ethan smiled. "Then you will lose. And I don't want anyone to die for something that can be shared." The two leaders stared at each other. Zareth's soldiers faltered as their commander hesitated. Ethan's calm courage and clear reasoning were stronger than fear. Hours later, the warlord's machines were stuck in the sand, engines smoking. Soldiers had grown exhausted and their thirst was unbearable. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Zareth and Kravor saw that victory was impossible. Finally, Zareth shouted to his troops, "Fall back! Retreat!" The soldiers stumbled away from Varentel, leaving behind damaged machines and empty containers. The Terralians watched in disbelief as the enemy left without a single casualty on either side. Ethan descended from the tank and walked slowly toward Zareth. "You can come back," he said. "We'll give you water and work together. You don't need to fight us." Zareth hesitated. His pride wanted to refuse, but the exhaustion and thirst were stronger. Finally, he lowered his head. "We accept." Kravor looked at Ethan, then at the Terralians. "You fight like a warrior, but you heal like a god." Ethan shook his head with a small laugh. "I'm just human." The Terralians cheered quietly. They had won, not through violence, but through intelligence, courage, and compassion. After the battle, Ethan worked with both the city's people and the former warlords. Together they repaired broken machines, set up new water lines, and made agreements to share the underground reservoir fairly. Highkeeper Varn addressed the city. Today we have not only saved our water, we have saved our honor. We have learned a lesson that will last longer than any drought. Sira looked at Ethan. You taught them kindness instead of fear. They listened because of that, not because of force. Ethan nodded. True strength isn't in machines or weapons. It's in patience, reason, and helping others. That's what can save a world. By the time the twin suns set, the city was calm again. Water flowed freely through pipes, tanks were full, and even the desert lands around Varentel began to shimmer, with small pools of life. The warlords had learned cooperation, and the Terralians had regained hope. Children ran near the well of hope, splashing in the clean water. Adults worked together, laughing as they fixed old machines and prepared for the next day. The city had survived the greatest test it had faced in centuries, and the human had made it possible. Ethan watched the horizon, knowing more challenges would come, but satisfied that today, wisdom and compassion had won over greed and fear. Varentel would live because one human had refused to watch others die, and one world had chosen cooperation over destruction. Part 5. The Planet Reborn. The mornings on Arkan had begun to change. The once dusty winds now carried a faint smell of wet earth and green life. Where only weeks ago there had been cracked soil and dying ruins, small plants now sprouted near the city's water lines. The twin suns rose over Varentel, casting golden light on the flowing water that ran through the streets, bringing life back to the world. Children laughed and played in shallow streams, their small hands cupping clear water to splash each other. Birds, once thought extinct on the planet, returned to the skies drawn by the freshwater pools. Even the older Terralians moved faster, their skin gaining faint color from the renewed life around them. At the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, the human engineer who had arrived by accident, yet had changed the fate of an entire world. He moved quietly through the city, checking the tanks, the pipes, and the growing fields. He didn't smile much. His satisfaction came quietly from seeing progress. But there was no denying that the city now felt alive. The Water Guild, which Ethan had organized, had grown beyond Varentel. Scouts and engineers traveled to nearby settlements, helping other Terralians set up wells, filters, and water distribution systems. Communities that had given up hope were now thriving, learning the same lessons Ethan had taught in the city. The Terralians had learned not only to survive, but to cooperate. Former warlords who had tried to seize the water were now part of the guild, working to maintain fairness. Zareth and Kravor, once feared leaders, had become overseers of water in the desert regions, ensuring every settlement had access to clean water. They had seen Ethan's approach, reason, kindness, and intelligence, and realized that domination was unnecessary when life could be shared. Sira stood beside Ethan one morning, watching a small garden she had planted. "Do you see that?" she asked. Tiny green shoots peeked from the soil near the flowing water. "This is because of you." Ethan shook his head. "It's because of all of you. I just showed the way. You did the work." Sira smiled, her large eyes reflecting the sunlight. "The way you taught us, cooperation, balance, fairness, that is your gift. You didn't just give water. You gave us a future." As weeks turned into months, Varentel transformed further. Buildings were repaired, roads cleared, and the ruins that had once made the city feel lifeless became the foundation for new structures. Water channels ran through the streets, irrigating gardens and small farms. Food was easier to grow now that water was abundant, and the people no longer feared the sun. Ethan continued teaching. He introduced simple machines powered by solar energy and water pumps that could work automatically. The Terralians learned to repair and improve these machines themselves. Knowledge spread like the water itself, quick, abundant, and life-giving. Highkeeper Varn, now older but renewed by hope, approached Ethan one afternoon. "You have done more than I could have imagined, human," he said. "We believed our civilization was lost, but you taught us that even in despair there is hope." Ethan looked out over the city, where children splashed in water channels and adults worked together in the fields. "Hope was always here," he replied. "I just helped you find it again." Varn smiled. "And perhaps this world belongs to you as much as it does to us." Ethan chuckled softly. "No, it belongs to all of you. I'm just a visitor who stayed long enough to help." Word of the Water Guild and the human who had restored life to a dying planet spread far across Arken. Travelers came from distant lands, carrying seeds, minerals, and knowledge to share. Settlements that had once been isolated and struggling joined the guild, creating a network of cooperation and trade. Even the deserts, which had been empty for decades, began to see small wells and vegetation sprout. Where water flowed, life followed. Animals returned to the plains. Small rivers began to flow into dry valleys, and the air itself felt cleaner. Ethan knew his work would never truly end. Arken had been so damaged that recovery would take years, perhaps decades. But for the first time there was direction, a path forward that did not rely on luck, fear, or dominance. One evening, as the twin suns began to set, Ethan called the city together. The streets were alive with people carrying lanterns and buckets of water, and children ran through the channels laughing. Sira and Varn stood beside him, watching silently. Ethan spoke to the crowd, his voice calm but strong. "You have rebuilt what was lost. You have worked together, shared resources, and protected life. You have learned to use intelligence, compassion, and effort to survive. That is more important than any weapon, more powerful than any ruler. This is how your civilization will thrive, by helping each other, not fighting each other." The Terralians listened in silence, understanding more deeply than words could express. This human had not just brought water, he had brought wisdom. And now, Ethan continued, "I must leave. My ship is repaired enough to continue my journey. But I am leaving something behind: knowledge, machines, and the guild. It is up to you to continue building, sharing, and growing. Arken is no longer dying. It belongs to you now." The Terralians were quiet at first. Then Varn spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "You are not just a friend, Ethan Cole. You are a teacher, a guide, and a protector. We owe you our lives." Ethan shook his head. "You owe nothing. The planet owes nothing. All I did was show that life is worth fighting for, that you are capable of more than you think. Keep teaching, keep building, keep sharing. That is all the thanks I need." Sira handed him a small carved stone, the symbol of the Well of Hope. "Take this with you," she said, "so you remember that one human saved a world." Ethan smiled and accepted it. "I will remember, and I will carry this lesson wherever I go." The next morning, Ethan's ship lifted off from the dusty plains of Arken. He looked down at Varentel and the network of wells and channels that stretched across the landscape. Green patches of land shimmered in the sunlight. Water flowed in rivers that had long been dry, and life, real life, was returning to the planet. Children waved from the streets. Adults worked in the fields and on new machines. Even the former warlords watched respectfully, their pride tempered by the understanding that cooperation was stronger than fear. Ethan pressed the ship's controls and the engines roared to life. As the craft rose higher, he whispered softly, "Remember, a world can always be rebuilt if its people refuse to give up." From the sky, he could see the twin suns reflecting off the water, glittering like stars on the planet below. It was a sight he would never forget. A world reborn through effort, intelligence, and compassion. Weeks later, across Arken, the Water Guild continued its work without Ethan. Wells were dug in new settlements, pipes were laid to distant cities, and farmers learned to grow crops even in formerly dry regions. Water became a symbol of cooperation rather than greed. The story of the human who had taught them this spread like wildfire. Parents told their children about Ethan Cole, the visitor from another world who refused to watch life die. They spoke of how he had built the Well of Hope, organized the guild, and defended the people without violence. Even the warlords became teachers in their own right, sharing lessons about strategy, leadership, and the value of protecting life. Zareth and Kravor, once feared rulers, now oversaw large water networks, ensuring fairness and teaching their people to respect others. Years passed. The scars of the past slowly faded. Forests returned to the plains, rivers ran steadily, and animals thrived once more. Arken was no longer a dying world. It had become a planet alive with energy, cooperation, and hope. And somewhere among the stars, Ethan Cole traveled onward, knowing that his work had left a permanent mark. Not just machines, not just water, but knowledge, courage, and the example of humanity itself. He had shown that one human could make a difference, not through force, but through compassion, intelligence, and persistence. That was the true power of humanity. The power to rebuild worlds, teach hope, and restore life. As the twin suns set over Varantel, the Terralians gathered at the Well of Hope. Children splashed in its clear water. Adults shared stories and lessons. And Highkeeper Varn spoke softly to the gathered crowd. Today we live not because of chance, not because of luck, but because one human taught us to care. Arkan is alive again. May we never forget that life is the most valuable gift of all. And above them, in the sky, the stars shone bright, carrying the story of a world reborn and the human who believed that even a dying planet could thrive.